conversation strays any farther afield, I'm gonna call this meeting to order. Robert, would you do the roll call, please?
Yes, sir. Chair Polito.
Here.
Vice Chair Massey.
Here.
Mr. Lee.
Here.
Mr. Hossman is excused. Mr. Dilbo.
Here.
And Mayor Lewis.
Here.
And Vice Mayor Lambers.
Public comment, if anybody has anything
We
off.
already talked about chickens.
We beat the chickens
But
to
that was
death.
separate.
I do have one thing. When I started reading the materials, whenever I picked them up Saturday, I guess it was, I noticed several references to revised budgets. So I pulled my budget out. Sure enough, there were some revisions. It seems to me that in the past, the mid-year budget revisions procedure was for staff to put together their recommendations, bring it to the finance committee, and then we would either recommend, well, I think in every case imaginable, we recommend that the city council approve it. Looks like we bypassed that step this year. Or am I just crazy?
No, we haven't. We've the past couple of years we've not come before with mid-year budget to the finance committee. It's just been direct from the staff to the council, and from there. What we do bring is we bring to the committee when we start the budget process. We do bring an update to what the budget is, what our assumptions are, forecast. We bring that to the finance committee, and then get some recommendations, and then we continue our process with the council as far as the budget process. And then we'll have several meetings and workshops with the council. But mid-year hasn't come before the finance committee.
I know I remember it, so maybe it goes back before your time even.
Possible. It could be.
It seems like a logical thing to do to me, but to run it past us if timing's good, but.
It is a little challenging from a timing perspective. We don't get mid-year information completed until
February, probably.
February, and then if we go through the finance committee and then the council, they're getting it at the same time. We're already starting the new.
Pretty soon we'll be just like CalPERS.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
2
2
years
years.
behind.
I'll see you in 2 years.
Well, all right. So I guess we're gonna move right to the CalPERS reports. Robert, you wanna
Yes.
lead us into these?
Yes, before you is the actuarial reports as of June 30th, 2014. And what we try to do is we get these reports, we bring them to the finance committee, and then we use these reports. There's information in there for us going forward in the fiscal year budget. And as you recall, in the 2013 actuarial reports, we discussed that the CalPERS was doing a policy, implementation policy for a smoothing policy, thank you. A smoothing policy going forward, starting with the 2013 actuarial. So we went over that last year, discussed some of the things that we're gonna change going forward. One would be the smoothing policy would ramp up rates up for 5 years. The contribution rates, the town's rates would ramp up 5 years. At that time, it was about a percentage, and they would end in 2019-20, and then they would ramp back down. And what they would do is they would amortize the gains and losses of the plan, and set the rates accordingly. So before you is just a recap. So the new amortization and smoothing policies were implemented. They were considering the gains and losses over the 30-year period. The rates would increase gradually, and there was some assumptions. So they did some assumptions. One of the assumptions was the 7.5 discount rate would be part of that assumption per year, return per year. And then they did some changes to the asset allocation of the investments. They've done some changes to that as part of the smoothing policy program. And then they did some changes in the demographics. And the main component of the demographics was the mortality rates. They looked at the mortality rate improvement, meaning that people were living longer, right? Mm-hmm. So that was part of that's a background information for you all is where we're at, and it's in the staff report. So
So can I ask a
Yes.
question?
Mhm.
The 5-year smoothing period started in the fiscal year we're in, was
Yes.
supposed to end in fiscal year ending in 2020, and yet if you look at the numbers on page 3, they continue to go up in 2020, 21, 21, 22. It's like, I don't understand.
page 3 of the staff report.
Mhm.
Okay.
And that's just a forecasting measure. They're doing up 5 years, the forecasting.
But why would they forecast further increases when the whole purpose of the smoothing was to get us back to normal cost only?
Well, right, and I think after the 5 years, what happens is then it's a ramp up and then a ramp down. So they'll reduce the rates after that 2020 year. They'll reduce them. So it's basically a 10-year, 5 years up and 5 years back down. But at the same time, we have to take into consideration that whole ramp up is dependent.
It's dependent on gains and losses,
Right.
I understand, but given their assumptions, I don't understand why it doesn't start back down in 2021. I mean, it's a little bit beyond my planning horizon, I guess, but
I think, yeah, and you're correct. But if you look at that normal cost, it's constant, right? In
The 9.1%,
Mhm.
you're saying?
right, it's constant because they're assuming that 7.5% rate
Yeah.
of return.
I'm
And
worried
I
about,
think-
I'm
yeah.
talking about the smoothing portion, the unfunded liabilities part, the
Which is at the
UAL.
bottom.
Right.
It just keeps going up.
It does, and it will, in a sense.
That's what I'm afraid of.
Well, it's going up right now. This is what they're projecting based off of the rate of return. In the staff report, there's some tools now that they started with the 2013 actuarials where they have the investment analysis scenarios, the scenario on the discount rate, what happens, what would the unfunded liability look like, what would our UAL payments be based on the rate of return. So I think this is just it's a projection for us for planning purposes, and to see what our rates could be, and they will change. And I think, in 2013-14, we had a 18.4 rate of return, and so those were built into the 15-16 numbers.
Well, that's a question.
Mhm.
The UAL is actually it's the gap between our funded status and our unfunded status, right?
Yes.
And that gap changes based on a number of factors to include CalPERS earning ratio, discount rate, and that sort of stuff. But doesn't it also change based on if our payroll goes up by 2%, our CalPERS contributions go up by 2%, and then that gap could get
Yes, it could
larger?
increase. In a sense, it could, because they take into that. They take into our normal cost of payroll. They build that into there, the rate of return. So if we have good rate investment returns and we keep paying down this UAL, that could shrink too. And there's a scenario where if the investment return is up to 18%, there's a return. You see that UAL decrease, and then in year 2, you see that there's no payment.
But the difference between this methodology and the 2000 side fund methodology was they actually took that number away created the side fund and said,
Right.
okay, here, Atherton, pay that down.
Right.
Versus this method, which says you have a fluctuating UAL that you have to pay to change that gap.
Right, to change it. And it's to pay down the unfunded liability quicker. This is why we're doing it. That's why they came up with this process.
I think we all understand all that, but if they're gonna use their 7.5% return, if it's all, the methodology's based around that, I, for the life of me, can't figure out why the numbers continue to go up in 2021 and 22. That's exactly not what they said would happen.
Is it because
I can understand it could happen if returns go to hell in a handbasket, or if we,
do more people enter into the pool though? Is the cumulative pool getting larger because more people are becoming part of it? So you're actually going to support not just a larger amount, but more people?
yes, we definitely
It's-
added 3
right.
people this year, I think.
It's adding more people, but at the same time, it's the opposite as well. More people leaving, and
And we owe it to them.
in that it's like
Well, we may or may not, but
it's people are retiring, right? So when they start to retire, and you've paid into that, and then there's the investments, if that changes, that also has an effect in this UAO payment. But the way they're doing it now, you're paying off your UAO quicker than before. If the rate in the staff report before, for example, the rate would be 18.6% for the miscellaneous, and that would include the unfunded portion. So that 18.6% would be based off of our payroll, right? And so what's happening is they've noticed that if it was based off of this, and every time the unfunded changes, and payrolls change, the amount, it doesn't tackle the unfunded portion as quick as it needs to. So that's why they did this smoothing policy, and then now they collect that unfunded liability as a portion, as a dollar amount. And this is where we started it barely this fiscal year. We have the UAL payment, plus we have our normal costs. So our
Could you just back up, because I apologize for
No, that's fine.
not really understanding the core issue here. So it's essentially that if you're an employee of the city and you work here for a number of years, you're put in some kind of retirement, but then when you retire, all of a sudden the city has this liability that's paid to you. And there's something that's paid, for X amount of years, or there's something for the life of the employee?
Defined benefit.
Fine, but-
Okay,
It
Contributions.
goes forever
okay,
and is adjusted for inflation,
Till they die.
okay.
and there's no end.
Or spouse, a spouse can.
Well, there, the
Spouses
only
are covered, but there's a survivor allowance.
Right, they don't get the whole thing.
And is there a certain kind of minimum, you have to be here for 3, 4, 5 years, or,
5 years vested it's a CalPERS system,
okay,
so it's in the reciprocal plan, so you can go any agency in the state of California that participates in CalPERS, you can go in there and continue to gain years of service under CalPERS. In order to be vested in CalPERS, it takes 5 years of service,
okay,
and then you become vested. And
Okay.
then if you leave, you have the option of taking your money and going
okay,
in cash in a lesser amount, or you just keep it, leave it on the books. And then the time of service that you have with that particular employer, so let's say you were with Atherton 5 years, you were with Menlo Park for 5 years,
mhm,
Atherton is only tagged within our unfunded liability for the time that you're in Atherton.
okay,
But if you retire 20 years later, that time in Atherton is adjusted for your retirement salary.
okay, okay. Okay. And then how do you get into a position where there's this unfunded liability? Is it just, it hadn't been accrued for, or how do you ultimately get into that position?
It's based off of rate of return, the market rate of return on the investment, and then the accrued liability. So the accrued liability is created, and then when the investments, however the investments come in, then it creates a liability, because if you've accrued so much and the pool ends up being $1,000 less, then there's that gap, or
Okay.
$1 million less, there's a gap.
Got it.
But
Our gap is,
minuscule.
Small.
well, yeah, we're in pretty good shape. I mean, there's a few towns,
No,
it's mind-boggling.
they'll never see the
Yeah.
light of day.
Menlo Park is like 293 million in
Wow.
unfunded liability.
Jeez.
Yeah.
Palo Alto's probably even worse.
I forget which one, was it Los Gatos that's grossly underfunded, that's kind of more in line with us?
I think is it Los Gatos?
And that's not uncommon throughout the
Or
state.
Los Altos?
Los Altos Hills,
Maybe it's
maybe.
Los Altos.
I have it somewhere, I don't have
My
it.
favorite thing was Stockton, they got healthcare for
Yeah.
life after 3
Yeah.
months.
Right.
There was an interesting case today.
That's pretty remarkable. That's,
What,
The Supreme Court today refused to hear New Jersey's unions
Exact.
on the pension thing, and they allowed the pension reductions in New Jersey to stand.
and so then the process of this whole smoothing is that, hey, there's $100,000 out of here that's underfunded right now, so let's just try to solve this over 5 years as opposed to 1 year, and that's why you have a smoothing process.
They're smoothing the paying down of that unfunded portion for 5 years, and they're changing their asset allocation and to lessen the volatility of risk on the investment.
Yeah.
And so with this paying down this unfunded portion, doing it this way, we're paying it quicker because it's not a percentage of payroll as it was. They're saying here's your UAL payment, here's what your normal cost is. You continue to pay your normal costs through payroll. This UAL payment tackles the unfunded portion, and so it gets funded into the investment quicker,
Got it, okay.
and pays it off quicker.
Can you kind of analysis to paying more of your principal of your mortgage down a little bit, and so you pay off your mortgage a little faster?
It's to pay off what you owe
Yeah.
quicker, and so before it wasn't. It was built in, but it wasn't getting done quicker.
As
It was,
aggressive.
and then they've also added measures because of if there's changes in the investments, there's mitigation measures now. So they're amortizing the gains and losses, and then they're taking that into consideration with the UAO payment and with your normal costs, with your rates. They're taking that into consideration. So at the beginning there'll be initial increased costs with the 5-year ramp up and then with the UAO payment, but their plan is to smooth, like the policy is to smooth the effect, the increases over time, and to pay off those the unfunded portion.
Okay, if we follow the plan, the proposal or wherever it's going out, and we continue to make these smoothing payments, at the end of the day, does that mean the unfunded liabilities will be reduced to a minimal amount? They won't be zero, I assume. They'll be.
Yeah.
What would
They
they
won't
go
be
to?
zero. They'll be minimal.
What's the goal? I mean, what's
The goal is
$1
to be
million?
completely 100% funded. And
Depends on who you talk to.
Yeah.
right.
I mean, it's a moving target.
Yeah.
Right.
That's not my goal either.
Okay, explain to me why not. Why would we not want to be? Why would we not want that?
Because
goal?
it's through smoothing, and so it's always every few years we expect as you were joking about Stockton.
Yeah.
Well, also joking, and also we're not joking about the CalPERS investment performance. There will continue to arise reality that's going to be different from the assumptions. The discount rate of 7.5% may not indicate a real return of 7.5% because
Right.
CalPERS is the largest pension in the world, isn't it?
Yeah.
So it's
Yes.
very hard to find good opportunities to hit that rate of return. So I assume that Robert will be telling us in future years that they will recalculate.
So we're always going to want to be underfunding a little bit.
You guys told me
Cushion?
something about in like 20 years ago, 30 years ago when we were doing everything they asked you, and then occasionally Sacramento tells you that let's reset the game,
Right.
and the people who have
But I
contributed
remember
to
that
the
they had
model-
ridiculous
What they
assumptions though in
did
those days.
essentially
They just
was the
joked about
unions
it.
and the politicians got together and
Right.
said, okay, we can put in these gigantic pension plans, and the investment gains will pay for them, and therefore the citizens won't see them. Machiavellian tax structure in effect in reverse, and that has not happened, which is what
Right.
Jeffrey's alluding to. So all these cities throughout the state now are faced with these massive pension and healthcare obligations that they can't fund. So most of the cities are not paying them other than some minimal amount. So the state is awash of these unfunded liabilities. If I'm wrong, correct me, but I'm
Up
pretty
to
sure I'm
600,
spot on.
600, $800 billion.
Other than
what
like
I've heard.
cities like Atherton, who continue to pay in, and I see we have that plan to discuss again today. And my position is, we are fools
'Cause there's-
relative to everybody else, because when the system crashes, they're gonna take everybody's money
I see.
anyway.
I see. Now
And
I
that's
get
been
it.
my
I
position
got you.
consistently.
So if we 100% fund
The
our
numbers
plan,
all work, I mean, I understand all the things we're trying to do, but that's how I understand the whole game, so.
There's
I think
another,
we're getting pretty close to
Right.
your threshold there, in my mind,
Yeah.
there's another aspect to it. The obligations, they go forward and change constantly,
Right.
and there are other people that are gonna live here long after we're gone.
Right.
Why should we start funding any of their obligations? I mean, this should be funded over time to some extent. That's kind of the way it's supposed to work. So to overfund, I think, is dangerous because you can't trust the state and you can't trust CalPERS, and because the people that enjoy Atherton later on should pay their fair share too.
But wouldn't their fair share be if we fully funded whatever obligations we made, and they would fully fund whatever obligations they made?
The
Wouldn't
other
that be
cities
fair?
aren't doing that, just pick local.
No, I completely get that. I totally get your point. I think you're right. I just, yeah.
Are we talking about? I'm sorry. I thought you were talking about Social Security for a second. That argument applies to many things. in society.
They're all sort of the same thing, actually. Yeah.
So, but George,
Yes.
we've talked about this, and in order to be completely liable for our big unfunded liability number, all of our employees would have to, live out their term in Atherton and then retire kind of all at once and then start trying to collect from us immediately, right? Is it,
Well, that's more of an argument for the OPEB stuff, the health
Oh,
insurance,
okay.
retirement. With CalPERS, it's earned by those employees that are
Right.
paid into the system. So we owe what CalPERS says we owe.
but not everybody's going to start collecting
No,
that
no.
all
They
at
weren't all
once.
collected at once. Some of them may leave the system and pull out their cash, or change to
Can
another
we start
system.
encouraging smoking, something like that?
But then the other issue that Jeffrey alluded to as well, or pretty much said, is, our unfunded amount is based on a lot of assumptions, one of which is the discount rate that CalPERS puts in there. This whole conversation is also driven by politics and the pressure on CalPERS to change their discount rate from 7.5 to 7.25 to 4. And the minute they do that, all of these actuarials project a massive
More
amount of debt
Right.
for all the local agencies. That's why they keep it at that 7.5
That's a
rate.
pretty high number, right?
And CalPERS is middle of the pack in that discount rate of the public sector pensions. They're not the highest and they're not the lowest on the discount rate.
They're the one that
7.5.
affects us, so,
Yeah.
Yeah,
we
that's
care
good.
about
But
the
as
others.
in relation to other pensions, they're not, people say they're probably the biggest, but they're not the one that are robust in saying they have the highest rate of return in their modules and in their assumptions. So they're in the middle of the pack of the public sectors.
Hey, George, when people are looking to work at Atherton, is the unfunded liabilities an issue they will look into? Is that something?
No, what they look into is what plan Atherton has for its retirees. Ours is called 2% and 55, so you get 2% times your years of service with Atherton times your pay
Okay.
with Atherton at age 55. It changes to 2.412 at age 63 and starts out at 1.8 at age 50.
Okay.
So that's our plan. You can go to another agency and you could have 2% at 60, or you could go to another agency and they have, as Jim alluded to, 2.7 at 55 or something like that.
Yeah,
You
three-
can no
three to
longer
50.
get those
Yeah.
plans
those are
any
done.
longer. CalPERS discontinued all of those as part of the pension overhaul,
Okay.
but that's what they look at.
Okay.
That was part of what was, the unions and stuff put together was a 3 at 50, which you got 3%, you could retire at 50 years old. And again, if the discount rate was right, the citizens wouldn't see that. So that was initially put in for police services. Then that was, of course, spread to systems administrators and secretaries and whatnot. But it is, George
Okay.
says
Public agencies.
they got so much pressure on it, some number of years later, they had to make some adjustments.
Okay.
But the adjustments are also future related, they're not necessarily current, they're
Potentially.
tomorrow's adjustments.
Okay.
So the question here with respect to our unfunded actuarial liabilities, do we take ERAF and other stuff to, advance fund our UAL to an 80%, 90% comfort rate like we did for the OPEB? Or do we just pay as you go and whatever the CalPERS pension actuarial say, that's what we pay?
Okay.
Yeah, so kind of piggyback. So the UAL started 15-16. So we paid $442,000 in UAL payments. So in the report, miscellaneous employees, we paid $116,000. Public safety employees was $325,000. So based on this actuarial, the unfunded liability for 16-17 is $146,000 for the miscellaneous employees and $402,000 for public safety. So the total contribution of the UAL component is $548,000. So below on the staff report on page 2, so there's our CalPERS contribution rate. So miscellaneous employees, the normal cost currently right now is 8.84% in 15-16. The normal cost of next year for 16-17 is 9.055%. This is the normal cost that's a portion of payroll. So whatever the payroll is times that is that normal cost that we
And
pay.
we don't participate in Social Security, so there's no additional
Okay.
retirement obligation for that.
Okay.
And so public safety is 20.23% currently right now. Next year it's 2.123%. the normal cost.
Is that just because it's a larger group of people, or what?
Better richer retirement plan. Public safety usually have a,
They got a better deal.
Yeah, yeah, I'm gonna negotiate that. I got one on my side.
The guy
Right?
said, if I had to do it all over again, I'd walk off the graduation stage at Menlo Atherton High School, go right down to the fire department and sign it. Absolutely, I'd forget about all the businesses and jobs I've had, I'd go right there, I'd be retired. 25 years ago, like several friends of mine who did that,
Yeah.
who worked in the battalions down here.
They won't
I
take
have-
you now, Jim.
Not now, no, I said back in the day.
I think I have 7 uncles who have done
That was
that,
100
actually,
years
yeah.
ago.
Go ahead, Robert.
7 uncles.
Who've done that, yeah.
Yeah. So kind of to put it in relation, so in 14-15, our employer miscellaneous rate was 11.84%. So it dropped from 11.84 to 8.84%, our normal cost. And then in the PD component, it was 29.56% in fiscal year 14-15, and it dropped to 20.23% in 15-16. So there was a reduction in the normal cost, and then they started the UAL component, the payment. Mhm. So prior to that, it was all built in to the rate. So you can see how the rates dropped from 29% in PD to 20%. So 9% difference. So that difference is now collected as an actual amount in what you see as the UAL. So kind of how I alluded to earlier, they have within these reports is they show you an investment rate of return. So on page 3 of the staff report, there's the town miscellaneous employees future contribution for fiscal year 17-18. So we know they give you on this report, they give you what your next current year is, and then the second year is a projection. So that second year isn't set in stone, but it's a projection of what it would be. So we know the 16-17 normal cost is 9.055%. The UAL component is $146,000 that we pay. So on this table here, it's the investment returns of 2.4% in fiscal year 14-15. They were the rate. They are the rates that will set in 17-18. So for the 2.4% in 14-15, and the 7 is calculated for the 17-18 projection. And then going forward, the assumption is 7.5%. So that's why you see it's a flat rate. But so you can see in 17-18, it's 9.1% the normal cost. The UAL is $183,000. In 18-19, the UAL will be $223,000. 19-20, $265,000. 2021, $281,000, and then so forth. So that's what they're projecting. So next year, when we get this report, these numbers will change. They'll be different because now they're calculating what the investment return gains and losses were, the asset assumption, what the allocation was, and we'll get our new rates.
Does the fiscal year change in June 30?
Yes.
So why is there an assumption about 14-15? That happened, that closed
Well, 'cause
Okay.
5 months ago.
they haven't finished, it takes them 2 years to finish all the accounting, but.
Oh, really? They don't even know, they don't know what the rate of return is for
Well,
2
no,
years?
The report we just
No, they
got
do.
is for 2 years ago.
So
So they're always behind. But the 2.4% must approximate what they think they made
in 14-15.
in 14-15.
Instead of the
That's
7.5.
really,
So they use that to set the rate. So they use that to set the rate for 2 years out, right? So in 13-14 we had a rate of return of 18.4%. So that was used to figure the 15-16 contribution rates and the UAL payment. So that it's a 2-year.
so it's guaranteed to be wrong,
Needless to
basically.
say,
The business cycle
we're
doesn't work that way.
poised
We have
to
to
have
pay
a
that. They
huge
don't give us 2
increase.
years.
Yeah.
Well, we could be poised to have a huge increase next
It's the
year.
government, they're
I think as we pay this UAL component, we'll keep paying that component, but it could increase. And
Well, based on a 2.4
Right.
versus
the 7.5
and versus
the one
the
before.
big
18 or
one,
whatever.
yeah. Okay, so
but they project that. If you look-
the 2.4 is
It's
baked
already
in here?
projected in that
Okay,
17-18.
So that's why it's going up.
Right. So it went from 146 in 16-17 to
Uh-huh.
183.
Uh-huh.
So it is figured in that
Okay.
17-18 projection.
Okay. So what's it gonna be, you know, how's the stock market been, how's it been this last year?
It's
Pretty
kind of
bad.
been, yeah, it's
Actually,
It's about 10-15% down.
yeah.
I think.
And it's still early. You know, finished the first quarter right now, and
Mhm.
second quarters it should pick up with
With the
travel
election.
and everything,
Oh, yeah, that's
election,
gonna make a
yeah.
big deal.
So
So there's another, methodology, I'm not sure Robert put it into the summary at the bottom for next steps and questions, but looking at page 4 of 7 of his staff report, he's got the risk analysis, investment scenarios, and to that, 2.4% bad scenario to the 18.9,
Mhm.
95th percentile scenario, we could set aside funds, not to pay the unfunded actuarial liability, but set aside an amount from the ERAF to accommodate what the finance committee believes might be a more realistic
Mhm.
projection for rate of return, that difference. Set aside that every year, pay CalPERS actual, and then do the same thing year after year.
So that we have that kind of in the bank.
Right.
But one option we don't have is we can't invest anywhere near the success they would, right? So we'd never catch up. We'd be getting currently 0.5%, they'd be getting,
Well, politically, you wouldn't be able to. I mean,
Well, I'm just thinking about the
yeah.
Massey problem. A nice thing to do would be to, if we could somehow wall it off and have it be growing, in some way that if there was ever a raid on the system, we saw that these funds aren't part of the
I mean,
system.
or even with the
Yeah.
intent, I'm saying that even with the finance committee, we wouldn't be able to politically
Invest.
support you, elected officials, to allow you to have the ability to maintain a program like that. I think you'd have tremendous pressure
Just
to
spend it
side
on-
funds.
to be managing. We'd have to, because like last month we had a meeting where we were talking about excess money, and we had to reuse that manager that came from.
Yeah.
Yeah, the audit of the investment
Yeah.
manager.
Yeah, it just
right.
shows you that we are such. I think the the government process
Mhm.
limits us from being able to act like private citizens would
Yeah.
with that money.
Well,
We
we
can't
have,
take as big a risk.
yeah.
That's true.
We also had, Mike, before you got on here, the last time this committee was asked to recommend to the council, Bob, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but we agreed, the finance committee agreed to recommend to the council that they take excess money, this was particularly, I believe, ERAF, and use it to pay down one of these, either the op-ed or the retirement. We also made the statement that that would be one of the last times we would recommend that for a while. Was that how it came out? Was that pretty close? We made a statement, we supported this time, but the next round would take some
Yeah.
serious discussion. And along that lines, I wanna say, until I see more money in capital improvements, capital money going into issues in this town that benefit the residents directly, I will not support any more money being paid into these pensions and healthcare funds.
This stuff would be a little easier to think through. I don't have the best handle on the status of our funding for the CIP projects that are already identified and in some stage, from early planning to wherever.
Yeah, that's part of the budget.
And that could be done on a single spreadsheet. Because if the general fund keeps, we're gonna have, what, 5.4 million unallocated funds. We do have to do something with them.
Well, during the last budget cycle, the council allocated
2.3 million.
2.3 million, stuck that into the CIP budget.
Right.
as
But
a
it's not
placeholder.
assigned specifically to a
Correct.
project yet.
As a placeholder, and then kept that 5 million in the general fund. So as you saw in the mid-year budget projection, it's projected that that's gonna go up by another, $300,000, $400,000. At the end of the year, they'll face that same decision again, as to whether they wanna allocate some into the CIP.
Right, I understand, but
Project.
to me, on a single piece of paper, 2 at most, you could have every project, what the sources of funding are for it, what we have and what we don't have, and then the 2.3 million type
Yeah.
stuff that's uncommitted and you know where you stand. To Jim's point, I mean, I went through that exercise a couple of years ago, right off the CIP report, and mapped everything. It was a pain in the neck, but really, you could keep it on a single spreadsheet and update it regularly, and it would be at your fingertips. And then you could sit here and say, well, we've got $5.4 million, but there's no way we need any of this for capital projects for the next 3 years. So maybe we should suspend the parcel tax, or maybe we should pay down some other liabilities, or maybe we ought to give George a raise. But
Well, go for the last one. But
We
we're
have
not
an
talking about that
opportunity
money.
to do
Right.
that, it's coming
Yeah.
up.
We're not talking about that money.
No.
We're talking about ERAF.
ERAF money.
Which
Oh,
Yeah,
is,
but ERAF.
ERAF is
it's
our
money.
money.
It's our
Well,
money. It's
right.
not like some separate little thing that we're gonna just do. We could take it and do the
Correct.
Marsh Road thing, or we could do a
Well,
riparian project
not
on the
really.
creek by the park. It doesn't have to go to the pension and healthcare plan.
Right. In fact, there's three
Yes, it
components
did.
of what ERAF can go to. It is OPEB, pension, or capital projects. One-time
I'm
capital
sorry, what's that
projects.
one? What, capital projects?
Yeah, one
The council already identified that, so you can make
Yeah.
those choices.
Yeah.
Did-
But we're not talking
did-
about
did-
allocating anything other than those funds.
Right. And
was
We're
that
talking about
actually, those limits were put in the resolution?
Yeah.
I remember the discussion, but I
Yeah.
don't,
those. Yeah, in that order.
Yeah.
So, healthcare, OPEB, pension, and then one-time capital projects.
so we, in our budget that we approved in 15, and I just pulled it up online, our 2015-16 allocation, we've got 5.7 million for capital projects.
Program, right.
Right? And, we've allocated 5.596 in funding. 625,000 for the streetlight replacement, 250,000 for the, hybrid beacon at Almondral, 200,000 for the complete street study, 700,000 for road maintenance, 170 for the Bellbrook Way culvert, park improvements, 225, the marsh retaining wall, 750. Do you have that there? Is it right there? No.
well, I have
Yeah,
the
we
You
budget.
have that? Yeah,
In
right?
the budget.
I'm trying to find the right page.
The bike ped, probably is page 13.
I don't mind, there's
On yours. And 631,000 for the Atherton Library, and then 1,796,000 for the Civic Center. So that's 5.6 million that has been allocated for going directly into
And again, I'm saying the
infrastructures.
difference between allocated and
And
actually
spending it?
seeing something spent, concrete, crews working on the street, stuff that the citizens can see.
Let's see all those sheriffs.
Other than in my neighborhood. Where you're gonna do lights.
Wait until we close off Marsh Road in April.
Well, that's another, can I raise that issue about Marth Road?
No, it's
No,
not on
we're
the
not talking
agenda.
about that.
It's not on the agenda.
It's a capital project, it's on Robert's page,
We're not there.
$3.3 dollars.
Okay, but anyway, so.
I mean, I can keep creating, George and I joke about it, it's potholes, I'm for potholes, you know?
You're for potholes?
Fixing potholes.
He's
You must
making-
love this place.
He loves potholes.
I love fixing potholes.
Fixing.
Okay, so.
That's my euphemism for capital improvements.
So Bob, that spreadsheet that you kind of talked about, and
Yeah.
as we go through the budget cycle and bring it through the finance committee, that's a conversation you guys will have.
Yeah.
Is how much money is in reserve, how much money is projected to be there, how much, and you're gonna comment on the capital projects funding, not the capital projects themselves, but the funding mechanisms for them.
Right now, it's all allocated.
Yes.
None of it's fixing that pothole. When they get back to my neighborhood, you'll get the
What did you
sound
show
off
on your
you, I know
page?
you owned.
$1,650,000,
Wait a minute.
the page you just showed me.
Well, see, this is
When will that
in the
come
budget.
before this committee?
It's not that spreadsheet.
Soon, right?
It's,
Yeah.
it's,
This is the budget, I haven't
Well, I
even
don't
found
know.
that page.
I think is in May, that component.
That's all right, I don't wanna,
it's the recommended operating budget
So,
that we have here.
right, it's in there,
It's the summary.
and we do show, through the process, how much we have, We go through the process with our public works, with Mike Kashwagi. We go through what projects we need. We identify the projects with the council, and then we kind of come up with estimates of what they'll be, what the funding that we do have, and that's where we got to last year. Let's put 2.3 million in capital projects, and we haven't identified those uses yet, and we will as we go through the budget process with the council. But one of the things too with the council, as part of their core strategy, there is financial stability, and one of those things was paying down long-term liabilities, capital projects, have stable reserves in the general fund. So those are the things, those are the components that we're following in the structure, and we have taken measures with the OPEB. Now the CalPERS component. Now we have tools. Before there was no tools. What is our actual unfunded liability? What would happen with the discount rate if it changed? What would happen if our investments didn't come in as we thought? That was the biggest concern. Now we have some tools to show us what they are. Now, part of the process would be, okay, we're not saying pay them all down today, not pay them down tomorrow, but let's just like we did with OPEB, come up with a strategy to have a plan in place, whether if it's 200,000 we start with, whether it's maybe a plan that, and ERAF is a good component to start with, because ERAF is something that we will not have forever. So if we don't, using that as a component and using some of that is a good place to start.
Robert, I want to take somewhat exception. I'm not against what you're saying, the plan to do it. What I will say is we have in the last couple of years through the council paid a lot of money into these funds. And what I'm saying is it's time to make a shift, and until that shift is done and some of these other things done, then we can address these problems in the format that you agree. I totally agree with you. I'm just saying it's a timing issue. We've collected all this parcel tax money, we have this money. It's time for the citizens of this town to see the potholes fixed and these capital improvements addressed. And that's where I'm sticking. I mean, I'm not against it. I'm not saying we don't pay it. I'm saying it's a timing issue. I don't mean to raise my voice, but that's just, you know. Again, the methodology, we all agree. We said we're gonna do that. We made a huge dent in that in 2 years. The council did. I mean, I forget what the number was. It was significant. And I'm just saying, let's take a break. Let's do something different for a while and then come back to it. Because if the revenues hold up as they have been, and the increase with all the new buildings going on, I mean, drive a street around here, oh my God, I drove some street the other day that I hadn't been on for a while, and I was stunned with all the new construction. And as I say to people, I said, one of the things I love sitting on this finance committee is I love this new construction. I mean, because we get the money, and then I get to yell about potholes, you know?
I have a couple of comments. I concur with what you're saying, very high level. I would say that if you talk about potholes, I would say that the use of, for capital improvement projects, the source of funding for those type of things, I think I think there are external forces that we have these good problems with the property tax rolls going up. We have a lot of construction. I think we have a lot of wear and tear on our streets, and I think that the fiscal structure that we have in terms of the fees that we collect for these types of permits should help to address those kind of things, not just the tax revenue. I think that as Mayor Lewis showed us the plan for the capital improvements, I do, as a citizen, as a resident and a citizen, I commend the council for showing a balanced approach. I noticed that part of the source of revenue for this set of improvements, including have donations, so it's not all coming from fiscal revenue, because there are a lot of projects in there that many citizens have different opinions about. I think that we've been very balanced about that, and I understand now why George has mentioned this at this point in time, because if you continue reading this report, I think it might actually strengthen your opinion, your position. But if you read this report, I'm quite concerned about this time next year, what we're going to see, because these scenarios that you've put here, the sensitivity analysis shows some bombshells about to happen, and for us as a political, I mean, with Sacramento, I'm not sure how we're gonna deal with this. You know, so I understand why you're saying these things. But is there something from a finance committee perspective where we can better quantify the amount of capital projects that have happened?
I
Because
think that's what Bob was asking specifically, and I think I'd asked for something similar last finance committee, as I recall.
well, I
I
mean,
just wanna look at it. I mean, yeah, sure, that's the budget again. I'm saying, I haven't seen it. I mean, I haven't.
To put it together takes a little work, cause you gotta say, okay, I got gas tax, that's gonna go to this project, 100,000 or whatever it might be, et cetera, et cetera. I did it once, it takes some time, but like I said, it could be put on one piece of paper, and then I can in good conscience say, yeah, we ought to throw 500,000 or $750,000 in an account to cover unfunded liability, or give it to CalPERS. I certainly wouldn't recommend that until I knew where we stood for the near term over the next 3 years for our capital projects.
this, well, Mayor Lewis was showing this. These aren't
That's
the
our 2015.
these aren't the exciting projects, but we do see the street issues, the street sealing and the street patching. The high level projects were obviously the things on ECR, the bike roads, the Marsh Road issue, the channel. And you've pointed out all these other
And
points
we
too.
just
Just touch screen?
approved the Spring Street patching at the council meeting this last, and what was that amount? I can't remember. It was 54,000?
It wasn't a lot.
It wasn't a
It wasn't
lot.
a
It
lot,
was
yeah.
a Spring Street
Patching
patching
program,
program that we just, yeah.
Well, these are staggering numbers. I almost,
Well, I think that comes
I
up to
mean,
the
even if I pull out
5.7.
the Civic Center and the library, they're pretty big numbers.
So
That's exactly the point I would be trying to make. The numbers in the capital projects are staggering, and you gotta address these things.
at the back of the budget
Mhm.
document, I think you're looking at page 13 or so.
No, I kept going further. It's all the way down to
You
the
get to
CIP. Yep,
Yeah.
that's where we are.
That's the
That's
spreadsheet.
by fund.
Right, what we
So
have.
you can look at the gas tax, the special parcel tax fund. And for example, in fiscal year 16, we started with a parcel tax fund of $186,000.
Shine.
We received
Yeah.
the 108,
That's
or
not
1.8
by
million, we transferred 372 to public safety, the remainder stays there. So we have total revenue available of 1.488 in the parcel tax. At the end of the year, after we've spent it on 1, 2, 3, 4,
Yeah.
5,
Is
6,
this what you're looking at?
7
Okay,
projects,
so
Yeah,
look at this
we're
one.
down to
I have-
24,000
We've got that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
at the end of this year.
So that's,
Again, I'm just
Right.
stating my position is
I think we all agree
let's
with you.
hold off. I'm not against doing it. I'm just saying, let's see some potholes fixed, some projects done, and then we can move forward. I think the methodology that we all agree to is absolutely works great. I mean, but I'm just saying, let's take a break. Let's let the citizens see something,
What page
because
is
they
that?
don't see CalPERS, they don't see OPEB. They see streetlights, they see roads, they see pockets.
Did we get the ERAF money?
yes, 1,066,000.
But it went down.
Right.
Yeah, I know, but I mean,
And
that's
it's
why
gonna
we're having this
continue to go
conversation, it's
down.
burning a hole in Robert's pocket.
Well, there's been kind of a shift
I needed
in
to
how.
sound on Lloyd Park.
No, and to kind of come back to the whole analysis and the component, we're trying to. This is a tool that this comes out. These reports come out every year, so we're just giving you an update. This is what it's going to be. This is what our rate's going to be in 16, 17. This is what our UL payment's going to be, and there's a tool to see. Here's some effects. Here's some risk tools. On page 4 of the staff report, we did talk about the investment return scenario for miscellaneous employees, what it would mean to the UAL payment, how it would go. So if 15-18 investment returns scenario was 18.9%, the UAL for miscellaneous employees would be 198,000, and then you see it's 0 in 1920 and 0 in fiscal year 2021.
Yeah,
So it kind of gives you
18.9%.
right. So it kind of gives you a kind of a scenario. What's the worst case? What's the best case? So right now we're in the middle, right? 7.5% is what they're assuming. So it kind of tells you what the payment will be. It gives us an option to verify and see, for planning purposes, this is what we're gonna owe.
Mhm.
Now, if it's 223,000 one year, 230,000 another year, you know, it gives us an opportunity to say, okay, if we do put money aside, how much can we? Let's say if it's in a couple of years, it's gonna be 800,000. Maybe we have 200,000 set aside. And so it kind of gives you these opportunities, these tools. And, you know, on page 5, it gives you what's gonna happen with the discount rate. You know, here, right now we're at 7.5%, so it tells our accrued liabilities 15.4 million. That's our accrued liability. Our unfunded is 2.4 million. That's what it currently is for miscellaneous employees. 2.4 million at 7.5 discount rate. If the discount rate was below 1%, it came in at 6.5. Our accrued liability would be 4.4 million. And then there below is the public safety component. You see, if the discount rate at 7.5, it's 6.7 million unfunded liability. If it goes down 1%, it's 11.8 million. So
Wow.
there's tools to so we know what it is. Now we know our funded liability is about 9.2 million in PERS right now. So are we gonna pay it off overnight, 2 years, 3 years? No. But as long as there's a measure in place to handle that, if for some reason something happens, we have taken some measures to handle that component. This is a reason. So another thing too, the pension. So pension the CalPERS has come up with a pension risk mitigation strategy, and I wrote this in the staff report. So in November, the board met, and so they came up with some mitigation measures. So what part of it is they're trying to reduce the risk and the volatility of the investments. So what are they going to do? They're going to probably lower the expected returns, and if they do that, what does that mean? Our costs will go up, right? So they're going to lower the investment return, the cost will go up. They'll reduce in lowering the investment return. That's one component. The other thing is they'll lower the asset allocation too. They'll adjust that component, because if you adjust that component, the risk reduces, but at the same time our costs are going to go up.
Robert, I got another question. In this, are they doing anything in a way of enforcement to say, like Palo Alto and these other cities who aren't even close to where we are, in saying about, hey, you guys need to come up with half of this total unfunded liability, you need to do something, because if the system craters, Atherton's retirement is not going to stay exclusively Atherton's. It's going to end up in the giant pool with everybody else. And I'm saying, if everybody else is not paying their fair share, Hillary Clinton, then we're as dumb as a post for doing it.
So the point, at least what I'm hearing, is the CalPERS identifies risks.
Right.
Risk to them. Actually, one of the biggest risks we have amounts to political expropriation, a political risk. That's separate from that's not a risk that CalPERS is looking at, but it's a risk that Jim has identified and looking at. To me, that makes a lot of sense, and that might be the biggest risk of all. So when you say, you know, we're looking at $9.2 million, maybe not. You know, we don't know, because we don't trust the system sufficiently to say we can count on those numbers.
Right.
Yeah.
And that'll change every year, so we'll get an update on that.
So let me ask you this. You guys obviously have a method to your madness. Where were you thinking this conversation was going to go?
Well, the discussion.
I warned yours yesterday, didn't I?
No, I mean, you must have had got an action item in the back of your head. I'm
The
trying.
council set a policy of, like I said, for ERAF, unfunded long-term liabilities and capital projects. CalPERS pension liability is an unfunded liability, so that's the target. Robert's doing the good finance director support of that, saying, here's my recommendation, you should do that. I'm in the middle. You know, I support Robert in that projection. I support City Council in their objective of what to do with ERAF. But as I mentioned a little bit ago, you could just say, you know, you could take a look at the risk. What's the risk that it could be a 2.8% rate of return? What's that difference for next year projected? Take that amount out of ERAF and set it aside just in case in the next year's budget we got to pay more toward unfunded liability. We've got the money set aside from ERAF to do that.
Well, I can see. Again, until I get a little study this stuff a little better on our capital projects, I'm not sure I can do it. But once I did that, I think I'll get to a point where I say we're in pretty good shape, because I got to that point before, a couple of years ago. I could see supporting where we create a reserve account, one more reserve account that we fund when we've got cash laying around more than foreseeably need, but we keep control of it and we take out the political risk.
Right.
Correct.
That's all we're suggesting,
Yeah.
by the way. Is we don't wanna give this money to CalPERS sooner than we have to.
The other thing I thought too is saying is take the ERAF money because it's eligible for those three things, and as Bob's alluding to, put it in a side fund, okay? If we need that money for capital projects, we can take it back for that. But if we give it to CalPERS, it's gone.
Right.
Yep.
Right.
So, it's our money. Let's keep our money.
No, and George is right. That's what part of the recommendations here. There's like 5, 6 different recommendations of what we can do.
Because
One
we
is-
already have reserve funds and we set a certain part of the budget, and
Right.
it just annoys me to write a check to CalPERS.
No.
But the options for it though are create an irrevocable
Trust. That.
trust that just says that's for the unfunded liabilities of CalPERS or OPEB or whatever you're gonna deem that, or just put it into a set-aside fund reserve that the council can then say, we have a special capital project this year, or we have.
Right.
Right.
We don't want
something
to get
else.
into
Yeah.
another irrevocable trust with
Right.
with
We
half-
definitely don't
half
wanna
a
give
percent
CalPERS
return.
before it's time.
But that accomplishes your goal of moving the ERAF and using it potentially for the unfunded liabilities with the option of the council to use it for potholes, should they need additional funding for this. Let's say something comes up, let's say we get a major flood in, West Atherton floods and Rick DeGolia's neighborhood, we gotta do something, or
Oh,
Elizabeth's
yeah.
neighborhood, my neighborhood floods all the time, so no big deal.
Right, I think that's kind of
I'm
exactly
gonna
where
build
we're
a
at.
dike.
Yeah.
We're gonna build you a dike.
So can we defer any decision on
Well,
this to the next meeting?
And we can. And
So we have time to put together, George,
Good luck,
you wanna
Robert.
go?
yeah. Thanks.
Put
Bye,
together
George.
kind of
I didn't mean to beat you guys, I didn't mean to be so
Kind of
strong.
put together kind of a simple, easily digested status situation on all our capital projects. Because once, I have the gut feeling, once we pull out the library and the Civic Center project, we got plenty of money. That's my gut feel.
Well,
And if I can put that on paper and
Yeah.
show it to everybody, then it's a lot easier to say, let's,
Right. Well, right. The biggest component is the Civic Center, right? You pull that out, but you have to understand we have a bike ped master plan has about 13 million in the plan, and priority projects are about 6 million that we're focusing on as priority that we can do. And then we have a drainage master plan that
no, I know,
That's
I wanna look at all of them
Right.
and see where we
Right.
are.
But they're plans that are multiple year plans. But I understand. But
And they can get
Right,
pushed
right.
out forever like the channel. I mean, we may never build that new wall. And that
we
channel.
we
No,
are.
we're starting in
We
the
are.
spring.
Really?
And that's good.
Yes.
It's
Yeah.
all permitted and everything?
Yes, we got the permit from Fish and
It's
Game.
taken
and
about
from
2
the
years to
state.
do
Yeah.
all that.
Yeah.
We're
And
good.
so, when
So
are
you're
they gonna
gonna-
start the Willow Road? That'll be great. We'll have Marsh Road and Willow Road
Yeah,
screwed
Willow
up at the
Road's
same
not
time.
starting.
Wait.
Yeah,
The,
Willow Road's real.
You said through the regular budget process, what will we see in May? It will not be exactly what Bob's talking about, it'll just be a one-year plan.
No,
What will we see in May?
like we've done in the.
Will we get the
Project
chart,
5
will we get
years.
the chart you're looking for in 2 months, or?
I'll make the chart between now and then if I
Yeah.
can.
No, it's part of the budget process that we do the capital projects in May. So we bring that to council, it's part of the study session, and in that study session is just only capital
I
projects.
mean, how about this group, will we see it?
Yeah, I bring it in May, our next meeting in May, I'll bring it.
So this many-page report on, see the CIP report or whatever you wanna call it, that's attached to the budget, it's about 50 pages.
Right. We have one study session on that.
Yeah,
With the council.
so you can, believe me, you can take all the data in all these pages and put it on one piece of paper.
Right.
It just takes a little bit of time.
Yeah.
The sources of the funds, because I did it once, the sources of the funds, what we're short, what we're not short, how much money we need.
Well, I'm just hearing that's what we're gonna
Yeah,
get at the
we'll do
next
May.
meeting, is that
Right.
right? Okay.
We'll do that, I'll bring it in the May for this meeting, and the council will see capital projects in May as well.
And and then we can defer any action on
Right,
this.
right, and from the beginning, in my staff report, it said it wasn't gonna be something that we're gonna decide today, but it's just good to have discussions.
Okay.
It's good to start this discussion.
Boy, did we.
Because it takes a
Because
while
this,
to
this
come.
is,
It
this
takes
is,
a while to
Good
come
copies
to
of gold,
assimilate.
this is something that I wasn't trying to say we need a decision by today. I'm just giving you, this is the history, the background, this is the report, and it's gonna take some discussion. But at the same time, just so you know, there's important validity to this that it goes into a budget discussion with the council. It's part of the council priorities that they, long-term liabilities. So yeah, we can
Can
table
we
this.
just emphasize, can you emphasize this? That, go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna
Yeah,
talk about that.
Exactly, that's what.
So, I see your, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 suggestions.
Mhm,
Right.
mhm.
I would like to emphasize that, as Mayor Lewis mentioned. I would also like to distinguish my position individually with the committee that I am not personally convinced that simply setting aside that money of ERAF is sufficient. I clearly understand and agree with what was said of the political issues, but the rate of return or lack of rate of return of a set-aside fund and the fact that we already have a general fund reserve leads me to believe that when the time comes for us as a committee to make a recommendation, I would like to still see and discuss, hopefully at least look at the option of some sort of a funding target. And
Okay.
some things I'd like to mention to you, for instance, is that the unfunded, the UAL as a proportion to normal cost of the miscellaneous employees is different from that of the
Public safety.
public safety. The ratios are off. So maybe there's a ratio at least that we could consider.
Okay.
They're out of balance. The amount that we're paying for normal cost versus unfunded UAL for miscellaneous employees versus public safety.
Well, I think the reason why the normal cost is higher in the public safety is because their plan is higher. Miscellaneous plan is not as high as the public safety. And the plan on each report, the actual plan is listed on page 18 of each report. So that's why the police the cost is different than the miscellaneous component. The miscellaneous, it's a different plan, and that's why you see the difference in the ratios.
I understand.
So yeah, I can come up with the funding target, the ratio for the normal cost. Where CalPERS has taken considerable measures to get to this point, starting in 2013 with the smoothing policy to tackle the unfunded portion, because the way it was before, we weren't going to tackle it. It was just a percentage to payroll. Payrolls are shrinking, people are retiring, and unfunded liabilities, what it is. So yeah, definitely. And again, these were just options for discussion of what we decided. We can use unallocated general fund reserves to fund these liabilities, additional contributions to CalPERS, beyond the required UIL, accumulate reserves and establish an internal service fund. That maybe one day down the road we say, okay, we have this much money, let's apply it to the UAL, or a revocable trust would be one option. Or just giving a bunch of options of how we could tackle this issue.
Thank you. And then, Jim, I'd like to ask a question. Do we ever have, in the course of, this is now only my second year, do we ever, like we look at ERAF, and like we've been asked to look at ERAF and contemplate it and make a recommendation, do we ever look at parcel taxes and other fiscal things that are almost also expiring, or that the elected officials have the ability to continue? Do we ever look at that as a finance committee and make recommendations or decide whether or not that should be continued or not? I forgot from the course of the last 18 months.
We have had discussions with that,
Okay.
and
In
again,
this committee.
it's right. Again, it's a recommendation,
Make a recommendation, and it's up to the council.
and it's the council
to
that
decide.
makes
course.
the policy.
So the
Okay.
council, for example, in the coming months, will have the option to get everybody to pay the full parcel tax, or to reduce it, or as they see fit, based on what they think needs to be done.
I see.
The parcel tax is gonna have to be renewed 2017.
No, I'm not talking about renewing it, that's a
No,
vote issue.
but the,
I'm talking about,
of how much we ask for the parcel tax. But I don't wanna get too much into this because it's not on the agenda.
Right,
We
right,
start
okay.
talking about parcel tax.
I'm
and
sorry, I
people
wasn't
find
listening to your
out-
question.
I'm
My
gonna go to Marsh
apologies.
Road if you're gonna go on parcel
Sorry, I
tax.
just wanna know because we were
Yeah.
talking about this.
No, yeah,
So I-
we do.
we haven't resolved anything, but we've certainly had discussion.
Right, and I'll
Well-
bring
So
this
if-
back, you know, as we get further more in discussions with other components. This is still gonna be in the hindsight, you know, as far back of the mind as
And so,
an opportunity.
just the percentage of allocation of the parcel tax funds, it's
It's
80-20.
80-20, so
eighty
before,
percent goes to capital projects, 20% goes to
To public
safety,
safety.
public safety.
right,
So that's the ratio.
Thank you.
yeah, so 1.4 million goes to parcel, projects, capital
Potholes.
projects. Yeah, to potholes, 1.4 million worth of potholes.
So if it's all right with everyone, let's move on to item number 4 on the agenda.
Robert wants to stick with this one, he's having so much fun.
I have to say, Robert, thank you so much for plowing through all of that and understanding it as best as you do and trying to put it in a format for us to understand.
Oh, no.
It's quite complicated. It's
Yeah.
very complicated.
Thank you.
Yeah, it is. No, you're welcome. Just wanna, you know, make sure that we know what we're up against with this unfunded component.
Mhm.
Yeah, this next line item, this next agenda item, it's just the financial report as of January 31st, 2016. So it's the combined statement of revenues and expenditures for the town. So we just finished the 7th month. This is as the 7th month of the fiscal year. So we're at 58% of the budget, basically. So the town's total ending fund balance as of January 31st is 37,072,296, compared to our beginning starting fund balance was 35,220,000. So we have a combined net positive change of 1.8 million, 1,851,990. And so this chart above just kind of shows you where we're at the beginning fund balance, where we're at as of January 31st, and then there's the net change. So of that 1.8 million for that. So this consists of the general fund, special revenue funds, capital improvement funds, and general service funds. So this is the combined statement for the entire town. So it just kind of, you know, the staff report is here. Behind the staff report, you have the report, the actual financial report of the statement of revenues and expenditures. So the general fund, we started off, as you know, most of our revenue comes in December and January. We start to get all our property taxes. So our general fund revenues were at 8.1 million. As of January 31st, we had transfers in of 186,000. Of that 186,000 is that parcel tax transfers in. The budget of the parcel tax is 372,000 into the general fund. So you have 186, and we do that quarterly. We transfer that money in. So 372 at the end of the fiscal year will come in from the parcel tax. So we've had expenditures of 6.3 million in the general fund. We transferred out 4.2 million, and as you recall, the 4.2 million was 680,000 was that OPEB contribution, 631,000 was workers' comp. There was an allocation of 614,000 for capital projects in the capital project fund for town administration. The 2.3 million of capital improvement projects that we allocated as part of that 4.2 million transfers out. So I don't want to go through all the general fund component, but just to kind of let you know where we're at.
Can I ask a technical question?
Yeah.
What is triple flip revenue?
Triple flip.
Oh, that's a
I
fun one.
read that last night and I
Yeah.
What? Triple flip. Okay, I don't know if you recall, in 2004, the state of California sold bonds because they were in debt. So what they ended up doing
They're
is
still in debt.
well, supposedly they came out of debt, right? That we're in the positive, we're in the
They
black.
have the same
black-
unfunded liability problem we have.
Right. For their budget, right? That's what they're saying. They were in the negative. So the triple flip, what that was back in the day they needed a source of revenue to get these bonds to get this. So what they did is the state took 0.25% of the sales tax of the state sales tax, that from the, with this, from all agencies. So, agencies get 1% of the sales tax. What they did is they took 0.25% of the sales tax, you know, because it's a constant stream of revenue, right, of the sales tax. And what they did is they backfilled that 0.25% with property taxes. So that's what the triple flip was. The triple flip swap that they called. And so it was a 10-year, so it was in 2004, I think it was almost, by the time they did it, it was 10 years that it was in place. So it just expired in December of 2015. So now that's going away. So now that that's going away, the cities are going to get that 0.25% in sales tax.
Of the 1%.
Of that 1%, we're getting back that 2.5%, and we're not getting it backfilled like we were through property taxes. So that's what that change was at the mid-year budget. So we increased our sales tax component because our triple flip came in, and so that's what that is.
So related to sales tax, is how do we actually directly receive sales tax in Atherton? From what activities?
From the county.
Well, I purchase purchase of cars. When you purchase a car,
And you're registered in?
yeah, that's one component. Another big component is if there's this sale of art or sale of something that's sold here. And last year we had a big windfall of about $392,000 additional in sales tax because of a one-time big sale. And usually that's art, and we confirmed with the state it was a big sale in here that took place. And so that was that sales tax.
I've got another question. This
Wow.
represents 58% of the funds for the year and expenditures for the year. Is that correct?
The budget, right?
Okay. On page 1 of 1, this might answer Bob's question. Capital project statement of expenditures, and this is
Right.
where I got concerned. Streets and roads, we have $2,100,000 budgeted. We have spent 12.6%. Drainage, we have $910,000 budgeted. We have spent 5.3% of that money. And that was the point I was trying to make earlier, and I forgot that this page was here. We
Right.
have this money budgeted, but it's not going anywhere.
Well, and that's why I didn't want to. We were talking in the first
I'm just looking at your
discussion,
paper,
right?
that's all.
No, but and when we were talking about the CalPERS, you were saying I don't want to get into capital projects, and I want to know what the amount is. It's in this report.
Right, no, it's
Right.
here, that's why I
Right.
pulled the paper.
So I didn't wanna
said that this might
go
make
into
the
a
job
tangent.
easier and answer some of our questions
Right.
too.
Right. So it's in here.
Yeah.
And one thing that you have to understand with capital projects, it's a ramp up. You have to do some studies. You have to do. It's also when they take place too. You know, they can't take place in the winter when you start the projects. You have to go out to bid. You have to do RFP. So some of these capital projects takes time to actually start. So if you see that, you know, if we have capital projects of 3.8 million, we've only spent 645,000 up to date because we're barely getting into that phase where the RFP has been issued, the contract is going to be awarded, and then we're going to start.
I understand all that, but when I saw these percentages, and I forgot this page was here, that's
Right.
what kind of set me off
So,
last night and today.
so related to this point, we were kind of, the town of Atherton, we're all kind of joking or making comments about chickens.
Mhm.
But I want to be serious and ask a question about if I have some reason to believe that in the course of business, and also if you look at things like the map functions on the internet, you see businesses that show up with addresses in Atherton. So I have a question: when there's a business that's being advertised in an Atherton address, do we as a town have a fiscal process that's similar to other towns that require sales revenue?
Business license.
Well, beyond that, like what if someone's running a professional business out of their home, and in another town, wouldn't that constitute a revenue generating opportunity from a sales tax perspective?
Yes.
What happens in Atherton?
In Atherton, they have to fill out a home occupation permit, and I believe in the ordinance, you can't have a business, actual business of more than 1 or 2 people in the town. So when we're notified of that, when ones, we send them a business license. They have to go through a home occupation permit, which requires them to be noticed within the area of, that they have a business in place.
Okay, so I have another question then. When I was, this is just it says regulated to revenue. So I was renovating my home once, and I had to find temporary housing. I didn't do this, but I found on Airbnb there are a number of properties in the town of Atherton that are being listed.
Right.
What does that fall under?
That's right now. There's an ordinance that doesn't allow that in Atherton.
Oh, okay. I was just
And
curious.
so we have code enforcement that works.
That's going on.
And in
Yeah.
theory,
Okay.
they did send letters or go out and contact everybody.
I'm just
found
very
on
curious about
Airbnb.
this. Yeah. Because when you talked about the triple flip, I just thought we were talking about business occurring in town of Atherton.
Right.
I'm sorry. Okay, thank you.
Right. No.
Yeah.
But for majority, we have
They're
no
not supposed to be.
businesses.
Okay.
Right. Right. And if there is, there's a one shop person that's selling something, and it's usually art, and the place of business is here. But for most part, we don't have
Business.
business
Well,
zoning.
the Circus Club, that's,
Well, yeah, they're
You know, I
one.
mean,
The
there's-
sales tax, the
That's-
service club's
yeah.
one. Right.
and what do we get out of the private schools? Are there any taxes that we,
No.
yeah,
Private schools?
I said private schools.
Yeah.
Oh, private schools we do.
Yes, we do. Yes.
I heard.
Public
I was here.
schools we don't.
No, I said private schools.
Private schools, yeah.
Private schools we do.
Mhm.
If they have sales tax, they have to file that. If they sell anything, they have to go through the board of
Concessions and stuff.
yeah,
Yeah.
board of equalization and sell and charge sales tax. And
It's a
then
very
turn that in.
interesting question. Well,
Yeah.
I'll be interested in seeing that in the upcoming months and
Let's
years.
start talking about the Airbnb.
Right. No,
Wow.
and that's on the radar, but here Airbnb is not allowed in the town.
So there's no short-term rentals in that 60 days, is that correct?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So I have a question on the combined statement of revenues and expenditures.
Mhm.
It transfers out, that's OPEB, workers' comp, and then capital improvement projects.
Right.
But under capital improvements funds, I don't see any transfers in, so are they just, those
Oh, it's-
transfers included in revenue?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And the bulk of it's down in the last, just the capital improvements fund, the
Yeah,
last line?
Bulk of it, that 2.3 million is in that 3 million of the revenues.
Well, but there was another 614,000 too,
Right.
right?
Right.
So it's all down there.
Right.
That probably adds up if I do it.
Mhm.
Well, it doesn't quite.
The only thing that should be in there, if it's more, it's because of interest.
Okay.
Yeah. And that 4.2 million that's transfers out in the general fund, you're right, 2.3 million went into capital projects, 614,000 also went into capital projects, and then we did 631,000 went into the workers' comp fund, and then 680,000 went into the employee benefit fund, because that's where we pay out for that OPEB.
So to Jim's point, it does seem like we've spent, after 7 months in the fiscal year, granted some of those months are winter months, that we've spent a surprisingly small amount of money on it
Well,
compared to budget on,
The streets and sidewalks.
yeah.
yeah, and drainage and,
Mhm. Well, on page 6 of the staff report on the parcel tax. So the parcel tax has listed in there, has a number of projects in there. There's a streetlight replacement project, a Marsh Road wall repairs. That Marsh Road wall,
That's a big one.
it's taken a while.
We're not allowed to talk about that.
Why, no, you can, it's in here. You couldn't talk about it in another.
Finance.
You can't talk about it.
The
can't
youth,
talk
there
about
are
the
several
profit.
youth in this room.
We can talk about the money, not
Yeah,
the traffic.
yeah, we can't talk about the issues about it, so I'm just letting you know. So the parcel tax on page 6, what's listed in there in the middle of the page. So the ending balance right now is 3.5 million in the parcel tax, and so we have program capital projects in there. So the street light replacement, Marsh Road wall repairs is going to take place. That's a project that's been in the works for a couple years now. We finally got the permits. It's going out to RFP for a contractor, and it'll come in. The council will award the bid, the project. Drainage improvements, hybrid beacon at ECR. We're currently working on right now. What's holding that up is Caltrans. Caltrans has authority over the ECR component. We're working on, I believe it's the drawings of the ECR beacon lights.
That's a
that
very
we're
recent
working on.
project. That's
Right.
within it's very recent.
El Camino Real and Bike and Ped Master Plan improvement programs. So those are programs that are dialed in. It's just they're in the pipeline right now.
So let me ask
Where's
this
the
question.
bike and ped, is that included? No, I don't see that there under capital projects, and it's a big number.
Well, yeah, it's projects that we're still working on. I put this as the current projects that are coming forth within the next couple of months. The bike ped, we just did one component, but the bike ped master plan is like 6 million. Like that, it's a total of like 13 million, but we've dwindled it down to 6 million.
Can I ride my
priority
Harley in the
projects.
bike lane?
You want to buy your own bike lane?
Harley.
Can I
Yeah.
ride my
I have to
Harley
excuse
in the
my- I
bike
have to
lane? I'm a
excuse
little
me.
old for
Thank you.
bicycles. I
Thank
got
you
one
very
quick
much.
query. If this money is not spent, which it appears, it may not be, does that roll over into
We
next
take it
year's
away.
budget?
Don't use it anymore. No. Yes.
Oh,
Well, I'm just
you're
thinking-
brutal.
No, I was just thinking as an add-on,
No, it
if
does.
we don't spend it and it's cash, we could roll it over, that would lower the need for capital improvement next year and might.
And it does, and we do that
Might allow
exercise.
some of that money to be funded into the pensions and.
Right.
Okay.
We do that exercise, because sometimes these projects, and I've listed in there, some projects will cross multiple fiscal years
Right.
and multiple funding. So if the budget was approved here and it's carried over next year, we'll continue to carry that budget, whatever's left of this budget, we'll carry it forward into that project. And so that's the problem that we have is capital projects aren't, some of them they can get done in one fiscal year, some we
Yeah,
don't
no,
start till the
I was
following
just thinking
fiscal
about
year.
if the cash isn't spent,
Yeah,
having that cash for next year and not do a
We're
reduction
really in
and
a
add
good-
to it.
we're in a good spot.
Mhm. Yes.
Jim, we're in a good spot. Don't you think we're in a good spot these days? Don't you think? In a good spot.
Okay.
We're okay.
We're in a good spot. I agree.
How could we be in a bad spot with a mayor like you?
Yeah, no, it's with the finance director, with our city manager, with property tax revenue,
Yeah.
and,
That's all good,
it's
yeah.
good.
Yeah.
Okay, you got any other
Thank you.
points on that? I
No,
think-
this
I think
is the
it's-
report. I listed upcoming CIP projects. I know that Jim was looking at that, and you kind of see where revenue and expenditures are on the capital projects. So that's it.
Did you see that, 650,000 for the street patching?
Yes.
Did he see that? Did you tell him about that?
No.
Show him about that one.
We have
The road maintenance
yeah,
program?
Road maintenance program.
700.
700,000.
None of it's on your street.
That's good, done over
Yeah.
on my street. It's all gonna go on the west side, where the rich guys are, Mike and I live in the lower east side.
Hey, I got my street done. I don't know, I'm just kidding.
You're happy.
I'm just
Any,
kidding.
anything else, other than the next meeting date? Is that meeting date
So the
okay
meeting date
for
and
everybody else?
is
Everybody?
that okay? May 10th.
Yeah.
And that's,
The
just
second
so I can,
Tuesday.
we go into the actual budget process and that's when we start the budget cycle
Well,
discussion?
we have the council has a budget workshop overview in
2nd.
April.
Oh, April.
April's our first one.
Yeah,
So
May
how
is,
about this
May is a
committee?
little late to, for us
This
to get
committee-
involved.
This committee was
After the April council meeting?
will May. The April council meeting is kind of like an overview. The beginning of May, the month of May is the major part of the budget.
You got a date on that
discussions.
April thing?
It's the first budget. It's the first study session in April.
First
First
Wednesday
Wednesday
of
in
the month.
April.
Yeah, it's first Wednesday of the month. So that'll be the beginning overview kickoff.
Do you wanna have a joint finance?
And we did last year. We did
That's
have
what
a
I
joint
would,
finance.
I would prefer.
Yeah.
I
I'll
can
just-
talk to city manager, maybe we can have a joint finance, council meeting on that.
I'd-
That would mean that,
I'd be in favor of
would
that.
you be in favor of that? Okay.
Yeah, Wednesday, April 6th is what.
So that means you'd have two meetings back to back on a month, month to month, instead of
I
every
know,
other
but
month.
we
Could
get,
you
we
do
get
that?
paid overtime.
Okay, I think it's double. Would that be okay?
Sure.
Yeah.
So
Hey, Elizabeth, one question. What's the 1.8 million for the Atherton Civic Center project? What is entailed in that?
I think it's, the 1.8 million.
Yeah.
That's
Any
the,
architectural?
it's site improvements, it's budgeted for site improvements, maybe, the moving of the, water line. It's not construction. It's
No,
not,
It's not the actual construction of the project.
construction.
Are the architects funded?
No, no, no.
Funded privately.
Under that, okay.
That's all funded privately, yeah. With Georgia here, but,
With the Atherton Now fundraises for the,
for the construction.
construction
And
component.
the architects.
So this is just the component for,
Is it the building department?
Yeah, the building component.
It's the building department's component. There's 2.3 million in the building department savings account, essentially.
To replace the trailer.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
And so there's a percentage. So I don't think that is taking all of that.
no, it's not.
That's for,
That's just what's in the account that we have that was accumulated prior
mhm.
to,
The 2,050,000,
yeah.
but it's all going into the civic center, isn't it?
Yes, when the construction and everything starts, and
Right.
there's allocations of it now being taken out to pay for architectural, their percentage, like 10% of the whole nut. Like the library pays a portion of the architects, and then the Atherton Now is paying for the majority of it because of it's all percentage
Where'd you
allocation.
see that number, Gary?
You know, on the very back page of this, and it's it's about 3/4 of the way down,
1796?
yeah.
It's a budget number, I think, that.
On what page?
The very last page
Of
of
the
the
budget.
report.
Oh, the capital project.
Mhm,
Okay, I was looking at that.
yeah.
Yeah, that's the, that was the component of the Civic Center
Project.
capital project, yeah, that we have
And so that's a budget number, and 101,000 has been
spent
spent.
so far. Yeah.
And I think that was originally thought that, shovels would go in the ground, and there would be, moving around of streets and things
Mhm.
that
Yeah.
the town would pay for. So,
Yep.
yeah,
And why did the unveiling get stopped?
the
No
plans
funding.
are ready.
Yeah, grants and funding.
Worth the wait though.
Anything else? Move to adjourn?